problem is the heater blower isn't working all the time. The driver says sometimes it works fine, sometimes it doesn't. Now you may find that when they bring it to you, it's not working. It's a little easier to test. But what do you do when they bring it to you with that complaint and it's working? Then you need to test it even though it's working and see if it's the bad blower motor or what. We're going to show you how to do that now. Oftentimes, if you have a motor that's not working, you can bang on it like a fuel pump or a starter and it'll start working. And in this case, we can do the same thing. If it comes in and it's not working, you can bang on it, and if it starts working, it's probably bad. But probably is really not a good way to charge people a lot of money to fix a part. We need to know that it really is bad. Now we're going to use the current probe to test this, because on a current probe we can actually see the waveform and see what the pattern looks like. But to use a current probe, you can see that it's kind of hard to get that in there. There's not a lot of room. So if you run into that on this situation or any, here's a way to get around that. Now around here we always keep wires from things, and sometimes you'll find the exact wires, or you can simply make these up. You just need 2 wires with the right ends on them, and then we're just going to put this in line so we can put our probe around this. Now we'll just come in here and pop this out of here. Now I'm going to put some wires in here on those terminals. Now you see we're just going to put terminals on there, and then we can bring them out this far. Now we just bring this up here and we plug these in. Now we've got plenty of wire to put our current probe around. Now when you hook up your current probe, always take it off of the wire, turn it on, and then zero it. And if you look at your lab scope, you can see it when you zero it. That's going to give you a true reading now based on 0. There's no current flowing through here. Now you put it around your wire. Now we're going to turn it on. Now this is the actual blower motor as it looks. Now that is a bad waveform. But just to illustrate this, we're set right now on 0 to 10 milliseconds. I want to change that, so go up, change your sweep, and from 10 I'm going to go to 20. Now that just gives me a longer look at it. That is a bad waveform. Now how do you know that that's a bad motor? How do you know that that's a bad waveform? Now for some of us who've been doing this for a while, we can recognize a good waveform against a bad waveform. You can tell when the pattern's good or bad. So like anything, you kind of have to build up your experience, build up your repertoire of knowing what's good and bad. So any of you new techs out there that are beginning to learn all this stuff, I'd advise you to use your lab scope often, even if a motor is good. If you got the time, hook it up so you can recognize a bad pattern when you see it, simply because you've seen so many good ones, a bad one just jumps out at you. So in this case, what we're actually going to do to illustrate that, we know we've got a bad waveform, but I've got a brand new motor here. So we're going to actually tap into this, leave the settings just like they are so that you can see the difference between a good and a bad waveform. Now we're looking at the bad waveform. Now we're going to plug in the new motor. We're going to leave this plugged into the electrical connector, and we're going to pull these out of the bad motor. Now I'm simply going to plug these into the new motor. The motor runs, and if you look at the pattern on the lab scope, this is a good waveform pattern. We haven't changed anything. We're still on 0 to 20 milliseconds. Now if you want to see this a little bit better, on this scope you can simply drag this down, put it down where you can see it better. Now this is a good waveform, showing good contacts within the motor. It's a sine wave. Now, just to compare, we're going to go back to the old motor. Take this off of here, and we'll plug it back in here. Now we plug back into the old motor. Look at the waveform. You can see how broken up and how uneven that is. That's a bad waveform. That motor is definitely bad. So we're going to replace this blower motor. Now in this case you actually have to take the computer and the washer fluid box out of the way so that once you get that out of there you can actually pull that motor out. We'll do that now. Now the blower motor is actually underneath this cover. It's out under the hood on this one. As you can see, we've got this plastic cover over everything. Now in these Blazers and some of the pickup trucks and so forth, it'll have this kind of a setup. Now you see ours is actually kind of broken up because this plastic is actually getting kind of brittle and crumbly. We can actually just break it out of there. Now you'll see they actually know this has got to come off because they've put on here for motor service you've got to cut here. And there's a little arrow coming down here and it's pointing to this mark right here. So you would normally have to cut this out anyway because this is actually burying in the motor. If you look down in there, the motor's actually down inside there, so you've got to cut all this out. Oftentimes this thing, when you try to cut it out of there, it'll cut fine, but this one is so old and brittle it's just crumbling. You don't have to worry though because you don't have to put it back. It's just to gain access. Now you can see on this bottom half it continues the mark where you're supposed to cut this. The top part was so brittle we got a lot of little pieces that just fell off down in there. Again, you don't have to replace this, you just have to cut it out of your way to get to it. It's important that you're going to have to get all that plastic out of there, even that down in that corner, so you might just have to take channel locks or something, grab a hold of it and pull it out. Otherwise, when you go to pull that squirrel cage or the blower wheel out, the plastic's going to be in your way and not let you get it in and out. Very tight fit, but you can get it out of there. Now if you look in here you can see that once that squirrel cage is in there, all the air is going to go inside. That's why you don't have to put all this broken plastic back. Again, it's a tight fit, but if you wiggle it around you should be able to get it in there. Notice there are some curved and some flat edges. Let's kind of rotate them around to get it in place. Once you get it in place, the electrical connector goes straight up, but you got to put in this little drain hose first. Put that in, rotate that around to the bottom, and it goes in that box. That little hose also gets some of that air forced back into it to cool the motor. And then your electrical connector goes up on top, and then you're ready to put your screws back in. We've got the blower motor all back together. Now we're going to put the washer tank back in. Next, put your computer back in. If you notice on this computer, they're all color coded and they're marked as which ones go where. You see they say black or white. They're marked where they go. After you get your computer mounted, then you're basically done.